This is Branding in a Black Lives Matter movement. We're going to explore why finding your voice and knowing your brand is essential for success in 2020. I'm Brooke Thomas, and I want to introduce you to our panelists. Theo Dumont, managing partner of Alta Media and the PR firm for Spike Lee. Karla Ferguson of the Yeelen Group, and Phylicia Fant, co-head of urban music at Columbia. And of course, Rob Richardson himself. Thank you all for being here. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Good to be here.
I want to start off just to I have a question, kind of a discussion, a prompt for everyone. So feel free to jump in. This I want to hear from everyone. Do you believe it has become mainstream to be more socially conscious? Are we there yet?
I think as people of color, we have always been socially aware. I think that social media in the times that we're in has made everyone else hyper aware of our situations. Mm-hmm. We wake up looking like this every single day, so we are always a part of the conversation. I just think more than ever, people realize that to ignore it is actually just not beneficial. And also, I would say just being blind to the fact that these are real issues that affect everyone. And to move forward, we all have to pay attention right now.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that. And I would say that a lot of folks, it's now, I think it's a little, it's kind of popular now because it's, you know, it used to be a controversial statement just to say Black Lives Matter as if that's controversial when you're just trying to say your life matters. But now everybody says it. Every corporation is like, we believe in Black Lives Matter. So it's kind of, I think it is popular to at least pretend or at least say that you have empathy. And people, I think, not only with social media as Phylicia pointed out, but I think in this unique time with COVID-19 and the fact that the whole world had to stop and really observe the injustice that we know, just being people of color, being Black, we know happens every single day. But seeing that and having nothing else to do, but, you know, if you saw just what happened to George Floyd, just watching that, well, I know we all did, just watching that for almost 9 minutes, just seeing somebody's life being taken out of them and everyone just acting callous about it. And then everybody asks the question, does this happen all the time? The answer is, unfortunately, yes. And that's just the beginning of it. So I do think there's more awareness now. And in this moment, people have had to pay attention. And so I think it's more popular now. To that point, I just saw a survey in 538 from polling that just says now, Black people still is at the top of their mind, but the majority population is starting to wane because, again, it's not the focus right now, but it's always the focus for us.
I agree, Rob. I mean, we're born this way. We look this way. We have our experiences oftentimes based on the way that we do look. So at least for me, my awareness of Black Lives Mattering and social consciousness has been since childhood. The reason I got into the business I'm in is for the same exact reason. Today, we do see that it is a popular thing to do. You have to show your goodness, your mindfulness. So now with everything in your face, and we're all focusing far greater than we did in the past because we're all stuck at home thanks to COVID. And we are forced now to look at everyone's social media account. We're forced to, watch the news. We're forced to kind of deal with issues. Everything's slowed down. So now it's in our faces. We see the disproportionate impact that COVID is having with regards to Black and brown people, the death rates, things like that. So yeah, I mean, today it's definitely become an in your face, if you don't address it kind of subject, then you're probably a part of the problem.
Theo?
Oh man, yeah, it's tough, right? Daily, right? Daily. Yesterday, there's a video released of the Toronto Raptors GM who was making his way on the court. And then the police officer who's suing him clearly pushes and shoves him. And that's a lawsuit,
Twice.
Right? And people are saying, oh, why did it take so long to come out? And, it's a legal thing. But this happens every minute in this country. Mm-hmm. So it's painful. It's painful, right? And it's been happening for decades. So I just feel like I hope it's not flavor of the month. And I hope real things start happening for us.
Do you think I didn't want to cut you off.
Go ahead.
I'm curious, do you think you've seen a real shift in, because when we talk about how we live, of course, this has always been life, and you're able to, when you look like us, you're able to separate what people who consider, there are a lot of people who don't look like us who consider human rights politics. When you're a Black person in America, you've never been confused about the two. So do you think that you've seen a shift from a branding standpoint to where people now realize that you can't sit on like, oh, I don't want to offend people who think this, I don't want to, and that the power is with the people who are pro equal human rights?
I mean, that's complicated. I mean, a little bit, right? I think there's a little bit. I've seen a little bit of change, but then it just all comes back to the root of the problem. They're going to try to monetize on our culture, and it's very dangerous, right? And again, flavor of the month, I hope not. A little bit of change, but I mean, I'll take anything, honestly. If it leads to more progress, I'll take anything. But it's a lot of problems, and I feel like it's a bigger problem, right? I feel like it is a political problem. I mean, if we hadn't gone through this political climate, how would it look? What would it look like? Would people be looking in the mirror? Would there be these little changes that you're seeing? Maybe not. So with every bad, with the worst administration in history, possibly.
And that's saying a lot, but go ahead.
Maybe there's a silver lining, you know what I'm saying?
And
here's a question is, if things change in November, what happens? Do the people hide again? And
that's a great question. And I have a thought on that, and I want to hear from the rest of the panel on this, because I think the present occupant of the White House is more of the symptom than the actual virus. He's creating a pandemic by his failure of leadership.
Yeah.
Right. But in terms of him, like, I think it's something that we tend to just say, if we change that, it's not, because the system, he's a symptom of the system. And so I do not think our lives get better. And in some ways, you set this point, the fact that he's empowered kind of racism to be accepted, and people have seen that, that has actually helped highlight the situation. I think if it was a normal president, maybe this doesn't happen like that. But I will say, and to another point that Theo said that I really want to hear from the panel on as well, is about this idea of monetizing this moment. I'm naturally suspicious of anybody, corporations and everybody that, 1 minute, no one would even utter the words Black Lives Matter as a controversial statement. The next day is everybody says it and it's cool. And I'm like, so what's the reasoning for that? The reasoning is that there is some money, there's some value in that. And what I have interest in and what this conference is about us collectively coming together and owning some of that equity that we are creating. We are creating this value, but value often flows through us, not to us. And I want to make sure more of it comes to us.
I mean, I think you said it right there. This is definitely a monetization era of our culture, but I think the shift is, can we actually learn to capitalize off of it? I think that has always been the problem that happens, music, film, politics, everyday life, is how can we become the owners of our own brand? How can we actually take stock and actually have a moment to say, okay, you all have watched us suffer. You also have watched us, rise from this pain. You've seen us overcome all of these conversations. Now, once again, we're in the conversation, but corporations are being asked to actually fund these thoughts. So I think knowing that money is there, knowing that, fine, people are giving hundreds of millions of dollars to these conversations causes, instead of, to your point, I guess, getting frustrated by the monetization of it, we have to say, what do we want to do as a community and on equal footing? Where do we go in, and where do we want to see ourselves have pipelines to ownership? How are we hiring? How are we employing? How are we passing down to the next generation? And can that be consistent? Because the real issue is we're going to always face this. I really feel like history, to a certain point, is repeating itself. But are we going to be able to actually put in the systems of pipeline opportunities where we know that after this, we can continue to employ the next group of Black entrepreneurs, understanding that Black future is really what we need to focus on? And do we really have the tools in place to make sure that Black future is consistent for the next generation?
So I'm curious, can any of you give us examples of how you've approached a client or an environment that has been racially biased?
I may have some examples.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in the art world, and it's notorious because the art world upholds the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
What we see every day in museums, what we see, even on television, anything in the media really is an artistic creation, right? And it tries to keep things what we call blanket American or Eurocentric viewpoints, really shutting out a lot of people of color, Black people, women, anything that's different, anything that doesn't fit in with their standards of what they would like to represent. So for example, ever since Black Lives Matter gained this huge momentum in the last 6 months or so, I would say, I've had more boards of cities and corporate boards coming to me to diversify their art collections or their public art projects. And, they come and they're kind of with that, oh, so we'd like to bring you on board. We'd like to have you showcase some of your artists, have them, participate in making our city or our organization more inclusive and diverse. And I understand, I say to them frankly, I understand you want to participate in the current atmosphere and start to correct some of your past mistakes or oversights of not including everyone in the conversation. So of course, oftentimes it starts with, oh, it'd be great exposure. But my first thing once I hear that word is no, we don't do this for exposure. We do this for equity. We do this in order to be able to earn, right? So that we can continue to create more works. And it's not just about having our voices amplified and getting out there. It's also about compensating us for our product, our work product, our creativity. So that's been something new that's starting to happen. And it's been very interesting once I shift their conversations from this, talk of exposure, and it would just be great to have you on board to, okay, so how much are you paying the artist, or how much are you paying my organization for putting us all together? And that's when now, it really says to them, okay, put your money where your mouth is.
Yep, I agree with that. And I just say, if you don't bring any money to it, then you're not trying to solve the issue. Because that's the only way you're going to actually show me that you value it. Don't tell me that you value it, then don't have a budget. That you just have a symbolic statement, which is what a lot of people do, or they do the next thing. And this is no disrespect to those who are in the D&I space, but I will say this from a general point of view. Generally, that's an easy box that they check. The revolution will not be brought to you by diversity and inclusion training, right? They know that's a check the box that people do. And I want us to take this moment to go further. Like, okay, I'm not against D&I. I'm for actual real results, because D&I, as we know, most of the time is put in a separate category. It has no power, has very little influence, given a little bit of budget. And then we get to have a great after party. Then everybody goes home, and the situation is the same as it was, and the corporate structure is the same as it was. So I want to, and I believe we should, Brooke, I'll take this moment and it's an opportunity where people are open and make them feel uncomfortable. If you really want to solve this issue, we have to do more than what we've done before. We have to make sure that we have systems in place, and we have to actually look and take a deep dive into how we are spending our resources. What does your corporate board look like? How much money do you spend with firms of color? How much effort do you actually put into doing that? And then, this is why we've had this more in this conference. We're creating a platform, and we want to help build the community. But we're going to challenge these corporations that say that this is what they care about. This is where the funding is. I'm an optimist, but I'm also always a little bit of a skeptic. So I think we're going to hope for the best in people, but we're going to challenge them to meet the words and the symbolism that they're putting forward.
I like that you brought up diversity and inclusion, because that usually, if people, if you look at different companies, they hire someone for that role who is not diverse. And the first step, diversity and inclusion, would be to diversify and include more people that are outside of the status quo into your office, right? You need to hire not just one or two people, you need to hire a bunch of people so that there's a safe space to change the environment, to be able to change the perspective of the environment, not just turn into, someone who has to fit in so that they can keep their role and never be promoted, never be listened to. That's a huge failure that you see all around, and people pat themselves on the back because they have this new role, which basically just becomes a next part of HR. Unless you get someone in there that really cares, but that's often I've seen a huge complaint from people about that. I'm curious, when do you think, what's advice-wise, right? When should you turn down payment or opportunities when you feel your value is not being respected?
Well, I guess that would depend on how much of your creative agency you have to give up. Mm-hmm. If I'm presenting artists for a show or a project, and all of a sudden, the story is being told by some outside curators who don't reflect my values or my perspective as a Black woman, well, then I would have to say, sorry, but I really can't accept this, because what you're going to do right now is revise my history once again. You're going to retell the story from your perspective. The story only works if it comes from my perspective, actually. So, I'm not interested in things being whitewashed or Eurocentritized, if that's even a term, but I want it to come with the truth that comes from my community, from our community. So if all of a sudden there's a lot of censorship and a lot of editing, I will respectfully walk away. And I will let them know why I walked away, because it's pointless to have another story told by the hunter versus the lion.
Yeah, I mean, I would think it depends, but essentially when you know that you're not being valued is the time when you should walk away, because if you're too desperate, it's dangerous, because then you set yourself up for a situation where that will be something that is, people will accept that from you going forward if you accept that at that moment, particularly if it's a bigger opportunity. So, I mean, sometimes you have to just walk away from it. And that often gives you leverage in doing that. You have to have enough confidence in the value that you bring when you come to the table. Because we do bring more value. We don't get paid our value. And I'm a little sick of the mantra. I know we might talk about this later, but I think it's a good place to put it, that we have to work twice as hard to get half as much. Like, we need to end all that. Like, that's not how we need to think about this. We need to work hard to get just as much as everybody else, not to expect half as much. We can work. We expect to work hard, but we shouldn't have to, nor put the mindset that we have to work harder to get half. No, we have to work harder to get whole. That's what we're doing.
Let's talk about that, though, because can we realistically, because it's not like a mantra, it's the truth. Yep. So do we have the ability to change a system that we didn't create?
Right. I think there's a situation where we often say you have to go to grow, but to Rob's point, they really are going to change in these corporations. They have to understand turnover does not look good for anyone, right. And if you're turning over your employees of color, especially in higher positions, and as people grow, then that's something to be said about the corporation. So you have to look within and say, if I can't retain great talent of color, there's something wrong with the system. And I think what's happening now is just that, to your point, Brooke. They can no longer pretend like it's okay to lose great people in great positions that look like us. You have to want to retain us to redefine the culture in a building. You have to keep certain people who know the culture. So I think it's a respect factor that's coming with what's happening now, is the reckoning of when you know you have good talent in a place, it's your job to that talent and nurture that talent and keep them in your pipeline. So I really think now that's the conversation we have to have. As we start to get these jobs, we shouldn't have to work harder, to Rob's point. You should want to keep us because it looks good for you to keep us in your buildings and to show that diversity truly matters. If you're constantly finding new people to quote unquote look like me to fill my job, it says that you don't honor the people in the space while they're there. So I really think that, to your point, is what has to happen.
So I think I'm curious about this, because how do you fight back against that fear, right? So part of it is the system that you're very aware of, right? The other part of it is when you're the only person in the room, you have to battle being afraid of not being the only person in the room, essentially not being there.
Yeah.
So, I've been on many panels where you have young Black women talking about how they're in the office until 2 a.m. They don't take lunch breaks. They don't use their vacation days. They want to prove themselves. I have never had a boss that at some point I didn't see out of office emails, and didn't truly take their vacation days, leave when they needed to. But younger people of color, Black women, are afraid of looking like they're not up for the job or they're not fighting their hardest when it's not reality. But how do you fight against that? What's your advice to people, especially like young women in the business?
It's really never easy, but it goes back to what you're saying right now and being about your brand and being authentic. And it hurts. There's definitely days where you like, why is this happening to me? And why do I have to go through this? But at a certain point, you have to stay firm on your convictions. You will start to lose yourself if you don't honor yourself in these spaces. And at some point, to what I believe our other panelists said, if I have to walk away to keep my integrity, I just have to walk away and faith has to kick in. There's never really any answer for that. But if it doesn't feel right, if it starts to hurt who I am and deteriorate the person I want to become, it's time to walk away. And I've had to do that. I've had to say that I'm more important. My health is more important than this job.
Absolutely. I mean, we shouldn't have to burn out in order just to get half as much,
Right.
It's detrimental to our health, our mental health, our physical health. We need to be able to put ourselves first. This starts with self-love. Love yourself. Know that, the universe has something better for you. If this does not work out, one door closes, multiples may just open for you, right? You know that you're putting yourself out there. You're giving your best self, right? And that's a reward in itself as well. So we just need to be able to love ourselves enough to get past all these negative stereotypes that have been placed upon Black women. We're not angry, we're not lazy, we're not full of attitude. There's all of these things that we take on every single day, and it's draining. So love yourself.
Yep.
and just block out the noise.
Yeah, entertainment industry, right? I'm in the film and television space and live event space. Both been in-house, in studio, corporation, MGM Studios, and creating our own firms or working for other firms, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's no handouts, right? Earning it, doing it yourself. I started getting used to not seeing a lot of people that look like me, right? Just had it. And still, the question is, right, with COVID and this movement, what does, like I said before, what does the other side look like, right? Will those boardrooms change? Representation, the managers, the agents, does that change? There's like, you can count them. You can count them with your hands, how many there are. And I must confess, I went to an event once, and I was at Essence Fest, and Phylicia was there, and Phylicia was running an event. And I can't explain to you how proud that made me feel. I'm like, first of all, this is popping, right? It was a surprise event, not on my schedule. I'm secretly invited to this, and I'm like, who's running this? And I see her running the show, and everything is because, you're in an event space, there's a mutual respect, and you're like, she looks like me. So it's deep, right? It's a very deep situation. And I met a person who runs a branding agency, one of the top ones in Hollywood. I mean, every poster, every one sheet that you see that comes out, she runs this. Same feeling. I'm in this office and I'm like, what? You made this? This is so crazy. This is your idea. You're running the shop. And she told me what she's trying to do is a program where she brings in new designers from all over the country, right? And fostering the next hers, right? And I feel that's important, right? Like, it's cool, it's nice to talk about it. We're saying, yeah, put the money up, but we have to do it ourselves. So again, she was saying that what's hard is, though, there's the lack of education. There's no training ground. So she has to almost build the infrastructure herself. So if I'm looking at this and I'm like, you're doing this, I have to do it as well. So it's on us as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I'm on that point. Before you move on, Brooke, I want to just talk about that, because I think in order to get past this, we have to, first of all, get past the fear. We have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Look, that's part of growth. You can't grow and actually be comfortable. The two are like diametrically opposed forces. So kind of rejecting that fear and moving forward. I would also say we need to when you're in these situations, you're in hostile grounds, get allies. You can get allies from places you will never expect. I can just say, navigating, I should say, a really complex situation. I was on the board of the University of Cincinnati, very complex, very conservative board. And we dealt with a lot of really complex issues. One, we had one of our officers go out and unjustifiably kill an African-American man. So I had to go and really figure out how to move this board forward to make a lot of really consequential, hard decisions. And I was able to do that. And some of my allies were some of the most conservative people, or people that you may not think as allies. So I would say also, when you're in these situations, when you're in corporate America or wherever, don't assume that someone's going to be against you for whatever reason, because their political leanings, anything else. You would be surprised areas where you can make advancement. And I've had some of my best opportunities have not come from, I'm a Democrat, I've run, but some of my best collaborations and support haven't come from quote unquote Democrats. And so it doesn't change my political beliefs. But what I'm saying is sometimes, and I was like this before I got on the board, I was like, I assumed that people were going to have this and be this way. And often it was different than what I thought. So I would say, don't be afraid, figure out, get good allies. And then to Theo's point, and this is exactly why we're starting the Disruption Now Network and why we're starting all of this, we have to organize around ourselves. Like there is no superheroes coming. Like that's all. Captain America is not coming. Black Panther is not coming. Like we got to create Wakanda. That's all for the comic books. We have to create that together.
I want to talk about authenticity, right? Because using politics as an analogy, people kind of talk about like they don't want platitudes, they want policy. But then there's also the space of how it feels to hear a presidential nominee, a vice presidential nominee say something like Black Lives Matter, right? And so when you come to companies, big companies, a lot of it is platitudes and not necessarily their version of policy. How do you accept how that feels, live in how it feels to have companies making statements that you're shocked to see, and then also hold them accountable when you ask for, their diversity? Let's ask to see what it looks like at your company, and there's 2 Black people out of 700. How do you live in this new world and breathe in what's happening and also hold these companies accountable so that it's not just talk and a show just to, make a little money?
I'll start, I guess. So I would say words do matter. So I'm not going to say that I don't like the fact that people acknowledge that there's an issue. So I'll say that at the beginning. But then I would say when people say this and they open the door, the next part of the conversation is, so what are you going to do about it to improve the situation? Are you going to say that, or are you going to do your part to improve it? And then it goes back to really developing those relationships and then challenging people. Listen, if they're not doing it, then be willing to challenge them. A lot of people don't want to do that. And I think if I'm talking about us as Black people, are willing to understand our own value and work more collectively together, I don't think we'd have as much of an issue, because we do create a lot of value. We are very strong. It's just a matter of us understanding that as we navigate this process.
I think it's people of powerful voices making statements to change. Old Hollywood, there used to be leading actors making a lot of money,
right?
A lot of money. They had the power to make changes happen on these Hollywood sets, and at those times, they didn't speak up. Same thing with sports. Some of our leading leaders, decades ago, they had the opportunity to make those changes and recommend, I want more people that look like me, on this board of this company. And they didn't do that. So and then you have people that came through and changed that, and they spoke up and they speak up and they practice what they preach. So I really feel like it's, as we rise, we have to practice what we preach and say it, and just say it. Why, if this is not like this, let's change it. Why is it not changed? I hope there's changes on the other side. For instance, the studios, right? Press lines at these premieres. I speak with outlets run by people that look like me, and they say we don't get invitations to some of these premieres. They want to put me on the Black films only. So, and sometimes it takes a producer of power to say, what? Where are those faces at? So until people start speaking up, it won't change.
Exactly that. It's if you don't do something, then it won't change. And so I think even examples, and I say in a corporation, and not the one I'm at now, but it really goes back to even our interns. Our interns were all people that did not look like me, working on music that I worked, and have to go to these HR companies and say, look, it's important to pull from HBCUs. It's important to pull from Black student unions at USC, UCLA, and everything else, because they're there, they exist. So I think to what your point is, access and doing things, this is going to be a long process. I think that's what I really want to kind of get to a point. This is not going to happen overnight. So we have to do our due diligence. We actually have to stay focused on the fight. Like, I know we hear this all the time, and I know this is, again, history repeating itself. So our ancestors, our forefathers have all had this conversation, but we have to stay in the game. We cannot say when December hits or after this election hits that we do not go to HR every week to say, are you hiring more interns of color? Are you making sure they support themselves to stay in these internships? So I really just want to reiterate that this is not a slow, this is a long haul situation. This is going to take a second to get there. So to your point about inviting Black media, it's our point to look on the red carpets and say, we want to make sure that you're placed in the right position on this carpet, that we stop for your interviews, that you understand they should be invited, but it takes all of us to do it. So I think until we all collectively agree on the agenda as a people, the ongoing agenda that we want to push forward, none of this will really change. We have to all be on the same page. I have to actually know what everybody wants to do in every building, and we have to hold each other responsible and accountable. It's really beyond making sure they are accountable as much as we are accountable for ourselves. I think that's what I wanted to kind of just push out there.
A lot of us control budgets and things like that, and we can challenge it. And all of us can do, like I can do better too. All of us can do better in making sure we are pushing more when these things happen. Like, because there's all types of levels. Are you looking at professional services, accounting? Mm-hmm. Like, there are lots of opportunities. It takes us more work, but it's worth that.
I would say, depending on your level of power and influence in your industry, it's imperative that you use that power to bring the talent that exists within your community to the forefront. So if I'm doing a project and I know that these artists, these Black women are doing amazing work, I'm going to make sure that this group show of 30 artists will at least have, I would say half Black women, because I'm trying very hard to push our perspectives and our stories, but you need at least 10 Black women there as well. And I will insist that it has to be this way, but I'm also the type that will walk away if it doesn't go my way. So I think it's all about, constantly taking your talent with you. You've got to drag them into the room and insist. Going back to what Theo said about old Hollywood, I remember this story about Marilyn Monroe and Ella Fitzgerald. They wouldn't let her perform in a club. And Marilyn said, oh, no, we're not going to have this. I'm Marilyn Monroe, and this is what I want. I want my girl, Ella Fitzgerald, up on that stage in this whites-only crowd. And after that, it wasn't a question. She leveraged her power to get, justice and to make things a little better. And this was, this is not that long ago. I mean, I've got grandparents that would probably remember this happening, but that's the only way sometimes, you've got to flex your muscles.
So my next question is, and I'll start with you, Rob, because you mentioned kind of working across the line, working with people whose perspective is different than you, maybe not necessarily to a hard negative point, but definitely different. So best advice on approaching negotiations with clients or bosses who do have a clear bias?
First thing I would say is that you have to get an understanding of who that person is. So that they may have bias, but what actually ticks them one way or another. And also try to come outside yourself too and understand, have some self-awareness of what can trigger you. Because I can say they can be biased and that can exist and it's going to exist. Then you have to figure out what you can control is yourself, how you react to that. And you're going to know some things that are going to be very predictable. So if you're able to really have some self-awareness in two ways, one, self-awareness about who you are, what triggers you, and to not allow yourself to be triggered. And then two, to really understand that person and how they actually perceive you. Because my definition of self-awareness is not how you think of yourself. It's how others actually see you. Not how you hope they see you, how they see you. And if you can actually get to that level of depth, you can have a really profound impact on negotiations, no matter who the person is. So, and I've done this before, and, you know, I've had to have some really, really uncomfortable conversations. I'll tell you one, it goes back to the board again. There was a lot of controversy for me being chairman of the board. I became the youngest in history. There's a couple other African Americans, but it'd been a long time, but nobody had been like just mid-30s. They're like, no, I mean, so they're like, you know, it was a big process that no one else had before. And I had worked twice as hard, and I went to everything and did all that. And yet still, right, there was still this process to try to block this opportunity from me. They kept saying, well, you know, you might run for office. And I'm like, some of these people had made millions off the university. I didn't make any money, but you know, I didn't get to that. I just asked, okay. I had to actually confront him, and I had to ask him, well, why is my process different than everyone else's? And you can hear a pin drop. And he said, are you calling me racist? Are you saying I'm racist? Right? And I knew he was going to say that. I didn't call him racist. I just asked a question. That's what I told him. I asked you a question. And you know, he got real sheepish, and there was no other problems. But I had never, ever even hinted around issues like that before, even though there had been many things before that. And I'm not saying this is right, because we shouldn't have to take these little microaggressions, but sometimes you just got to, in order because you have to figure out how you're going to move and pivot for the long term. So I had microaggressions over many years. And what I did is I kept it as a note and say, okay, I know, and I've observed about this person, how they are. And I keep it as a mental note, not to take it personally, because guess what? It has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with the fact that I'm Black. There's something wrong with you. So I'm not going to internalize any of those issues on me. And if we can get to that, and this is hard to do, and I don't have it mastered, but as you approach that, that's how you approach these situations. Because if you can, to the greatest extent possible, it's a constant journey, master yourself and understand your own flaws, your own issues, and then really look to have empathy about how someone is this way, you'll have a much greater effect in moving them forward.
Phylicia, is it more of what you were saying earlier about playing the long game?
I actually agree with him completely. It is about the long game, but also learning when to pivot. But something that's very important, what he said, is taking notes. I think that, again, there's always a frustration point in microaggressions, but the truth is you just might not get along with everybody. You can try your best to, and I hate to use the word mute yourself, but at a certain point, again, you deteriorate. So you have to figure out that balance of what is okay for you. And I've dealt with a situation where I'm like, how can I communicate with this person without offending them? But also, we are in a very culture business. Part of my job is to be passionate. Part of my job is to stick up for my artists and what they need. And that's going to come out any way I feel, and not because I'm angry and not because I'm upset, but because I'm passionate about wanting my artists to feel their best self at all times. And when you're dealing with microaggressions within certain environments, it's often difficult to explain how to understand artists to people who do not see them as human. So in humanization and seeing me as human, I think microaggressions come because people don't think you feel the same way that you feel. You know, they don't see that you hurt the same way, that you cry the same way. Just because we don't look the same doesn't mean we don't go through the same range of emotion. So I say that to say I can't always please the person that wants me to mute myself, but I will think about how I'm triggered. I will think about the things that trigger them, but I've also learned that I have to document the ways in which I have tried to be a great coworker, and that has been ignored. I hope that makes sense when I say that. So at a certain point, say, look, these are all the times I've tried to come to you to meet you halfway, and you have not met me. Because sometimes examples are the only way people realize that they actually are the person at fault and not the other way around.
If I can, before you go on to the next one, I want to encourage the audience to engage. Tell us if you like something. Make sure you are asking questions. We're going to be able to get to that, right after this session.
Karla, I want to hear from you too. You know, what doesn't work? What else doesn't work when you're faced with this? What does work? What doesn't?
I think I might be a bit of an expert when it comes to various microaggressions. I'm based in Miami, and this is an extremely diverse population. However, we do operate on certain, under certain viewpoints, right? It's still the quote unquote American way, or the white way. So, the different populations that live here all have this idea of trying to become that superior group. So there's a lot of colorism here. So I will deal with microaggressions from from the language I speak, from the various islands, from, you know, am I mainland Black person? Am I an island Black person? Multi-ethnic divisions.
Oh, you mean the Kamala
to,
thing? Like, are you Black because you're from the?
Correct.
Yeah,
Right.
yes,
I
you're
get
Black.
that thing a lot, especially depending on how my hair is. You know, she's got the, you know, she's all straightened out, and it gets worse when you actually start to look like her versus when I'm just, you know, completely in my natural state, right? But yeah, and so right now, currently, I'm dealing with a lot of that because I feel like I'm constantly having to defend Kamala and her position as a Black woman, because I'm also Jamaican and from a multi-ethnic background. But you know, our experiences are very much the same. I'm also an attorney, so I went through that world. There are a lot of microaggressions at the level that you wouldn't imagine when it came to highly educated people. I got to the point where I stopped trying to explain everything also. It's not my job to educate you. You're more than capable of educating yourself. So, you know, oftentimes I've had those kind of moments where I'm just like, well, you know, if you really want to know about this subject, you can go and research it, especially with other attorneys, because that's what we do, right? We research a lot. And I've gotten to the point where I can't take on every single issue. And I do just, you know, I won't say I back down, but I'll get quiet and I'll say, well, I'm not really going to touch that because that's your problem, not my problem. Also, you know, going back to the fact that I'm in Miami and there's a lot of colorism, which is not just black and white here, right? We've got the various shades in between and the languages and the different cultures. So I think when you're in a melting pot like what we've got here, the microaggressions come off far differently. You know, you can have immigrant populations, first generation, and they're looking down at you and you're wondering, wow, really? You know, I've been here this long and you just arrived. So it's so many layers here.
It's complicated. I'm from Miami too.
I know.
I know. Woo! Complicated. Haitians, Cubans, Dominicans, American people, Boca Raton, Fort Lauderdale.
Mm-hmm.
It's just very, very complicated. And there'll be racists right into your face, to your face. And then that, you know, they have their own cultural, everyone's got their own cultural values. And then, you know, socioeconomic issues, Little Haiti, Biscayne. It is an interesting place. It is a very interesting place. And, you know, Florida is an interesting place. Because if you look at Orlando, I grew up in Orlando. Oh, man. From Orlando and Miami, 4 hours apart. And it's night and day. It's a very complicated place. But it teaches you, prepare for anything.
We know what we're talking about.
Oh, man.
So let's talk about influencer marketing. It's a new tool. It's a great tool. A lot of people are going to groan when you say that, but it's an effective tool. Can you tell me examples of how you've used influencer marketing successfully?
Oh, well, you know, I do contribute a lot of articles to various magazines and media outlets. And so, you know, it's always opinion pieces, my lifestyle, things like that. So I've become somewhat of an influencer. I guess I have to own that now. So whether it's a fashion brand or auto brand, whatever it is, you know, people look at me and say, oh, we like the way that you're living. We like the way that you're moving in the world. And so they tend to listen to you because they value what your opinions are. They value your thoughts and your advice on certain things because, you know, they believe that if they are in tune with what you're in tune with, they can get to that point in their life as well, right? I'm not a spring chicken, you know, I'm not a teenager or whatever. I've been around for a while. So I have a lot of younger people that come to me on a, you know, daily basis asking for advice, mentorship, things like that. And, you know, I freely give advice, especially when it's my people, because I want them to avoid a lot of the stumbling blocks that, you know, maybe I, you know, went through. Also, there is no roadmap for what we're doing, right? I've created the roadmap for my particular line of my industry. So I would say that social media has been great as far as equalizing the playing field a bit more, because it's really me speaking to the people directly and they can join into the conversation, and I don't have to go through some editor or some bigger platform in order to allow my voice to be heard. I can go on Facebook Live or Instagram Live, whatever it is, and I can speak directly. And so, you know, my voice is amplified by the amount of people that follow or listen and contribute. And I really love all of that. You know, I think influencer marketing is the future right now.
Yep.
Especially now, again, we're all pretty much stuck in one place. We're not out in the streets anymore. So we're focused on our computers and our devices, right? And so if you're bored, you haven't really had any social interaction in the last 6 months, you're going to go on social media. And so, you know, everything has gotten more amplified. My views are up, everything is up, because now people are focused on these products.
Yeah, I would say you have to believe it. You got to believe in the product. You got to believe in the product. It's got to be authentic to you, because we're almost like the gateway for the influencer. So if these are my friends or network of people of influence that I'm going to be presenting them something to talk about or endorse, I better really like it. I better it needs to be authentic to me, because I get one shot. If I send it to this person, it's a film or a product or something, and they're like, that's it. It's our relationship is everything. These are relationship driven transactions. So we can't take it in the BS. It's got to be authentic. It's got to be meaningful. It's got to make change. It's got to be something good that you're proud of to put on your wall, because, you know, a lot of these brands are just like, oh yeah. Get these, you know, hype this up for me. And then, you know, and they'll offer, it goes back to the earlier question, they'll offer you a nice check. But if it's not, you know, if you don't have pride in that thing, then I wouldn't do it.
I was saying brands still expect and need conversion. So if you don't convert, it doesn't matter. So exactly what you're saying. If they don't feel that it's authentic, then no one really wins. So I think with influencer marketing, it's definitely important, but and it really won't go away. But we definitely have to find the ones that actually convert the fan. And coming from a music space, when we're thinking about the influencers that we hire, if we cannot get people to actually download that song or follow that artist, if there's no passion in that click, then we didn't win.
And this, you know, this space is democratized, if you will, getting people's voice out. But at the same time, it's if everybody's out there, that means there's a flood of voices out there. So for you to have to be effective, I actually think your goal should not be to how can I get a huge audience. No, the question is, who are you? Who would be people that would likely align with your beliefs? And you focus on that. And I think where people get messed up is, how do you be authentic? You be authentic by making sure you are addressing issues that you care about, that you're aligned with. And at the end of the day, you don't care if you lose some people, because the greatest way to grow is to eliminate first. Who are you targeting? Who do you care about? And what is it that you value? And I think people now, because now you don't have to, as Karla said, you don't have to have a bigger microphone to filter your voice to be a certain way. You don't have to do that. But at the same time, I think people use the current environment just to say, well, how can I get clickable bait? How can I get people just to pay attention to me versus am I actually adding value? So being an influencer is actually figuring out how you create value for people. And if you do that, you will get value back. But I think people view this as, let me just go out there, figure out if I can just do something, say something crazy, and then maybe I'll go viral. And, you know, maybe you will, but you probably won't. And then when you, but you will likely just end up doing something, make yourself look stupid. So it's better to know who you are, be confident in that, and go from there. And it's a long process. And in this, and I'll just say this, and I'll end on this point. In this moment, when we're talking about advancing, particularly Black people, you know, we have to be careful to not allow ourselves to be used just to advance a platform to make someone look better, because they will, first of all, you might make a little small check, and as soon as they're done with you, if that's the only value you create, just trying to be a front for somebody else and make them look better, there's 1,000 of you that can be replaced. But who can't be replaced is you. If you know who you are, you bring that value. People, when I talk about disruption now, I don't worry about people copying it, because nobody can be me. Like, I'm not worried about that, because it's unique to what I bring. And people have to have that same approach when they look at influencer marketing. Like, what do you believe? Who are you trying to reach? Who is most likely to align with you, and where are they at? Understand who would be likely to resonate with you, and that will increase your chances of actually being a powerful influencer. That's how I look at it.
So if the question is, because I feel like people are going to ask, they want you to dive a little bit deeper into that. I think that's a great explanation. But if the question is, how do I drive engagement, but also stay real, not lose that aspect? Is the answer to that really not focus on driving engagement?
Phylicia, if you had anything to add on that, I'd love to hear that, your last point before you have to come back. And then don't worry, audience, she's going to be available to talk for questions. She just has to go out for a minute. So we still want to get your comments, still continue to engage. We love the engagement. Keep it up.
No, I think to your point, Brooke and to Rob, it is the balance. But at the end of the day, people are going to look to see if you stand for something. And so when you're looking for your ongoing cult following, as you will, what we still need to do is keep the artist focused, genuine. So I'm not saying that you can't go out and go try to get that follower, but at the same time, they'll leave you if they don't believe in you. And so you have to be willing to risk that person leaving in hopes that the person who understands you will come back and replace them, because that's the only longevity and have a consistent fan base. And we're more concerned with who's actually showing up repeatedly as we try to identify who that audience is. If we can't figure out who your audience is, who your fan is, who that person who is your diehard looks like, feels like, we can't grow your brand. So I'd rather you get rid of and weed out the people who are not authentic to you, who are just on that site because they thought it was fun to follow you for a second. And I'd rather you have 30 great followers who are always going to be there and become your cheerleaders than 100 people who only click on occasionally and do nothing to elevate you. So it is a risk you take and a back and forth as you push yourself out there. But the more you stay consistent with everything you do, the more successful you'll be on the long haul. That truly is a fact. You can have so many followers that do not engage with you. And if you don't have engagement, then no one's winning. And that goes back to the brand conversation. If brands realize that no one's engaging with you, but they're following, then they're not actually seeing the conversion. So I always say be authentic first.
Yep.
Stand, they will follow you.
Yeah, and Phylicia is, we haven't bragged on her a little bit, but we have an episode with her, and was it NDRE was one of your artists? Am I right on that? Was it NDRE? Yes, and it was a great story about that, and we can't go through it all, but it proves your point. Like, people were like, well, she's just, this Afrocentric person. Is there a place for her in hip hop? And we all know that there is, but it was making sure she was comfortable in who she was and focusing on that. So it applied. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. So as we wrap up, anyone else want to jump in on that? Like the focus on how do you drive engagement? How do you grow, but also not lose your, realness?
I mean, I think you have to just be real, be yourself. Your vibe really will attract your tribe. Not to sound cliche, but it's the truth. There are other people that are like-minded, that want to hear what you have to say, want to understand your experiences, that feel what you're about. And as long as you stay true to who you are and you project your authentic self, again, the ones that are just following you just to be there for a moment, you're not really so concerned with them. You're concerned with the ones that you're reaching, the
right.
people that will actually continue on your path, the people that you will influence to take the same steps, people that will want to become more open in sharing themselves with their particular brand of what they want to do in life. You've got to also have a bit of vulnerability and openness. It's almost like getting into a relationship with someone. Actually, you're in a relationship with your audience, with these people that are like-minded and that want to see you do well, and you're there to uplift them as well. And I think so long as you're being positive yet real, you'll be able to do that. You'll be able to uplift, and once people feel a sense of pride and that they are being valued as well, they'll stick with you, and they'll go on the journey with you. And I think that's important, is to be able to just, it's not about the follower thing and you're leading, and it's really a collective of people that say this is our common mission in life, and we're gonna walk the road side by side.
Theo, you got nothing?
You got to know the room. Yeah, you got to know your audience. You got to know your room. But yes, yourself, right? Inside your heart. just be authentic, be yourself, and that projects wherever you are, whoever you are. I had a situation where I was working with a filmmaker, and we ran the world. We did a campaign, and people loved the movie, and people loved the work. And I had to, and just seeing this filmmaker's passion rubbed off on me. And I had the same. I feel like I'm you right now. I'm loving the way you work everything, loving the way you work the room. We have a studio behind this. We accomplished great things, and then that's over. Now I'm independent. We've created our own label, our own production company, management, marketing company. So we have different clients. So I'm working now on a smaller film. Fast forward, right? So it's like, things move so quick in this business. That thing is history. So now I'm working on this new thing. I still have the same energy, right? I still feel like I'm like that filmmaker, and I got the studio behind me. And so I'm on this conference call, and I'm like, what? Let's go. What are we doing? What are you? Let's go. You know what I just did? I just did that. Let's go. And they're like, no. Who are you? Who's the director now? And I'm like, this guy, and it's a younger filmmaker. And they're like, that's all nice, everything you just did, all shaking the world and all that, but we're going to move turtle speed here. So I had to check myself. I'm like, I got to know the room. I got to evaluate. Listen, you be authentic, but not everybody's ready to shake things up.
There's a whole lot of, there's not a lot that want to disrupt, actually. I think disruption is the opposite of what the majority wants. So you got to go in an environment when you need to disrupt. Sometimes you just got to leave. You either have to give voice to it, and then if they don't listen, you got to exit.
That's so true. That happened to me recently. And I have a business partner. That's the thing too about having a crew, having people you trust, having a tribe that have your back. That is so important. I was on an island before by myself, but I've met some people in my life that have really had my back and have said exactly what you said, recently too. And you're like, you have enough clients to keep things comfortable. Is the staff happy? Yes. And then why do you have to, if this is compromising the situation and it's really disheartening, walk away.
I would say this too. It's part of trusting the process too. You're not going to overnight. Things aren't, I'm going to guarantee you this. I don't know how it's going to work out for you, but it won't work likely the way you expect it to. It won't be a linear process. There will be frustrating times. And you still have to find a way to keep going. And this is why I think you have to enjoy what you do, particularly if you're in this space. If you're trying to do marketing, if you're in this space of branding, influencer marketing, whatever you want to call it, content marketing, if you don't love this, you will not survive, because they're going to be long droughts. There's going to be opportunities for you to get discouraged. And if you don't actually like it and you're working 10 hours a day and, and then nothing happens and you don't gain more followers, and none of that stuff happens overnight. So you have to love part of what you do. You have to be pragmatic too. I mean, you have to have passion and some pragmatism. You gotta know how to pay the bills too, but you can't just look out for the short term and sacrifice the long term, but you also can't just look out for the long term and sacrifice the short. You have to do both, but you still have to have, I think, some passion. At least that is me. And then, also know what you're not good at and how you need help in other areas. And then be willing and be vulnerable enough, as Karla said, to go out there and get it. And before we conclude, I want to make sure we give a good shout out to Theo and Karla for both of all the work you guys have done. They both have episodes. So you can go back and check out Disruption Now podcast. They're both on there, as well as Brooke. She also has an episode on there too. So everyone on here has been on Disruption Now podcast. And I know, Theo, you have a big announcement coming up.
We're about Alta Global Media. We're about to produce Black Wall Street feature film by the Beza brothers. So we're so excited. It was brought to us by a gentleman named Blake Reading, who was at a company called The Machine, and we're going for it. So it was just announced today, and now we're going to be looking for a director, and I think we're closing in on that area, and we'll be announcing more shortly. But it's a very important project and such a powerful screenplay. And as I believe next year's the 100th anniversary, so this is going to be a big deal in 2021. So we're excited. And I believe LeBron James and Spring Hill are doing a documentary series on this subject. So I'm sure there will be several, and we're happy to just be working with some amazing writers on it and directors.
Important how much different aspects of media, television, film, how that it's more important than just seeing yourself. A lot of it, as we've seen in later times, in recent times, I mean, have become, that's education. A lot of stories we talked about, like there are things that based on what's on HBO, people are finding out about actual aspects of history that they never learned about in school, different movies. And sometimes things are hard to see, but there are things that you never hear about. You don't learn about different, even like slave revolts. You don't learn about that in school, and how often that happened, how often people were fighting back against this system, this horrendous system. And you learn about it in TV and in film. And so it's important. Someone who's from Oklahoma, I'm excited to see that.
Yeah. So, I mean, as we get ready to conclude, look, we want to take your questions. We want to thank everybody. Thank the panel for coming out. It's a good way to close that we are talking about the media and how important that is, because disruption now is about disrupting the narratives and constructs that people accept, but we can change. We can only change that together when we work together, connect together, build together. So I hope you're taking the opportunity today to do that, to network, to meet new people, to connect with new people. This is just going to be the beginning of this platform. We're going to do everything possible to change the narrative and change the constructs and work together to empower everyone collectively. So
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
For having us.
All right, congrats.